Have you ever heard of the carpenter's son? You might think it's a song about a carpenter teaching his son his trade. Or maybe a story about a father passing down his tools to the next generation. Well, that's what the people of Nazareth probably thought when they talked about Jesus, the carpenter's son. They saw an ordinary boy growing up in an ordinary town, the son of an ordinary carpenter. But Jesus wasn't just the carpenter's son, he was the Son of God. And he grew up in Nazareth. Not because he had nothing better to do, but because that was where his mission was. You see, right after the angels visited and the shepherds came to worship and the wise men brought their gifts, things got pretty normal. Mary and Joseph got on with their lives and raised Jesus in a town called Nazareth, pretty far from Bethlehem where he was born, and a lot further from Jerusalem, where the big religious action was happening. But that's where they went. Now, we don't know exactly why Mary and Joseph chose Nazareth. Maybe it was familiar. Maybe it was quiet. Maybe it was where their friends and family lived. Whatever the reason, it became the place where Jesus spent most of his childhood and teenage years. Now, to understand why Nazareth was such a good place for Jesus to grow up, you need to understand two things about Jewish life. First, they loved feasts. If you look at the Bible, you'll see that almost every month they had some kind of feast where everyone would leave their work and come together to praise God. They celebrated Passover, unleavened bread, Shavuot, or Pentecost, Feast of Tabernacles, and more. These feasts were times of joy, music, food, games, family and friends. Jesus celebrated these feasts too, especially the Passover, where he and his family would take a long walk from Nazareth to Jerusalem, a trip of about 90 miles each way. The second thing you need to know is that most people didn't want to live in Jerusalem. Even though it was the religious center, it was also the political center of the Jews. And that meant that the king or emperor had a big army there keeping everything under control. So most people preferred to live in smaller towns like Nazareth, where life was quieter and the threat of getting stomped on by an angry soldier was much less. So, because Jesus grew up in Nazareth, he got to experience all the best parts of Jewish life without any of the downsides. He got to celebrate the feasts. He got to learn the scriptures. He got to hear stories of faith and miracles. And he got to grow up in a home where his dad was a carpenter and his mom was a mum. His life wasn't perfect, of course. There were sick people, poor people, and mean people. And Jesus saw all that. But in Nazareth, he was safe. He could grow up with a strong connection to God, his parents, and his community. Looking back, we can see that Nazareth was the best place for Jesus to grow up. Sure, there were bigger, fancier cities around, but Nazareth was where Jesus needed to be. Gave him a stable foundation, so he could start his ministry later on. You see, even though Jesus is God, he decided to become a man and live like one of us. That means he had a childhood, just like you and me, full of laughter and learning, challenges and changes. So the next time someone calls you a country bumpkin or a small-town loser, remember Jesus was called the carpenter's son, and he grew up in Nazareth, far from all the action, out of the spotlight, in a place where life was simple and God was real. And if that's your story too, well then you and Jesus have that in common.